headphones if I need them, but I'd rather not use them because I've got a new machine here, which should be fine. But
yeah, we can hear you great, Peter.
Let me know if there's any problem.
We will.
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
I'm putting my phone and everything else off.
Peter, one last question. How would you like to take questions? Would you be giving breaks periodically?
I have, there is a break in the middle and there's one at the end.
Okay.
And it comes up on the slides.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone who's joining. We're just having our pre-chat, as per usual. Hope you don't mind. But tell us where you're joining from. And I just want to say extra thank you to everybody who's staying up late, because a lot of our audience is used to slightly earlier sessions. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Peter is positioning the flowers. Yeah, hi everyone, as you're joining. Yeah, we're starting all of these sessions a little bit early to give people a chance to come in and settle in, and hopefully things will work like they are supposed to. Fun anecdote, Zoom emailed me about 5 minutes before the session saying that the link is out in public and that might mean that people will attend. I'm like, yes, that's the whole point. Thanks, Zoom, for being so intelligent. Hello, hello, everyone who's coming in. And Peter, just so you know as well, we are recording our session today, and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel, because I've got lots of emails from people who said that they cannot attend, but really, really want to see it. So we are definitely recording. So that goes for everyone who's here as well. If you missed something, that's okay. There'll be a video up later this week so that you can reference any of the slides or anything that comes up. And we will post the chat as well in the comments of the video. But since we are at the time that we are at, so noon for me, let's get things started. I'll just be in the background for this one. Today's show is all about Peter, supported by Coacharia's very own lovely Vigi. But as we get started, I just wanted to say welcome to Awake, Aware, Arise, which happens to be all inspired by Peter, actually. So some of you might have seen Peter's previous sessions with us. He's done a few. The last one was back in May, I believe, and it was all about climate, specifically the fact that our Earth is falling apart and people are sitting around and saying, what can we do? And Peter's like, yes, we can do lots, so let's do it. And as coaches, we need to. And today, he's going to talk about all those things, reinforce the good points, and hopefully set some fire in our bellies to do more. But a phrase that he used was, where were the coaches when the banks were burning? You know, we had big crises before and coaches existed back then, but we weren't really visible or doing much. So after that session, Ram and I were chatting and thought that, yeah, where were the coaches when the banks were burning? Where are the coaches now? Climate is a huge problem. Of course, I care about it very much. I became vegetarian because of it, but there are other systemic problems that are destroying our world. I'm talking about racism, discrimination, oh my gosh, like so many different things that aren't just in one little country or one community. They're global. They are truly systemic. So Ram and I were thinking, you know, what can we do that's actually substantial and meaningful? And this event was born, Awake, Aware, Arise, because there are so many problems. And we have this amazing global community live here and who will watch this later for months to come. It's time to take action, not just keep talking about this, because time is running out. Things are falling apart. I don't want to scare anybody, but we shouldn't sugarcoat it. The world is not a good place right now. And we can do something about it, and we will do something about it. So some of the sessions during Awake, Aware, Arise are all about what can you do, you individual person? How can you look within yourself? What can you change? Others are about, you know, outward looking, and how can we use our skills as coaches and our connections and our position of power as leaders in many cases to influence the right thing. So it kind of spans the globe, spans the issues, but the point is we can do something and we should do something. So yes, please be here and listen and take notes, but when this is over, don't just be like, oh yeah, that was nice. Do something. On that bright note, I'm going to vanish to the background. Peter, it's so great to have you here. I am more than looking forward to this. Like, you're the highlight of my week. PG, you're my second highlight.
Thank you, Magda. Very happy to be second in Peter's amazing company. It's 10:30 in the night in this part of the world for me, but you can just see I'm all bright and excited. And I think that's really the magic of Peter and the topic that he's going to talk about today. So I'm just going to take a minute or so with a very quick introduction and context setting to this. So all of us know Professor Peter Hawkins, coaching for more than 4 decades, a leading consultant, and an author, of course, of many books. And I would say, in the way I remember and I refer to Peter is really a guru in the space of systemic work, systemic being, thinking, coaching, all of that. I was quite fortunate earlier this year to attend a program, a certificate program on systemic coaching. And I must say, Peter, apart from all the hats that he wears, is teacher par excellence. So much so that I have the honor of doing a session in this series. And I must say a large part of the inspiration came from the work that Peter has done and the kind of questions that he has posed to us coaches, saying, what is it that you want to do when there's so much going on in the world? How are you going to show up? How are we going to tap into the collective consciousness? And as Peter says, there are, he's 2 things he's really engaged with and busy with, his garden and his grandchildren. And I think a lot of what he's going to share with us today is going to be inspiration from those. I do know Peter mentioned that there may be, for those of you who attended the session earlier this year that Kocharya ran, there may be some repetitions in terms of the slides, but I think Peter has really brought in a lot more of his work into the session today. So with that context and a lot of excitement myself, here's over to you, Peter. And I will also stay a little in the background and really manage. If you have questions, do put it up in the Q&A box, and we will bring it up from time to time. Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you, PG. And a big welcome to all of you. It's lovely to see people join us from many parts of the world, from just down the road from where I'm speaking. I'm just outside of Bath, looking over the hills in England. And we've got somebody from Bristol and somebody from Twyford, close to where I was professor at Henley Business School. But we've also got people from Vancouver, one of my favorite cities, from Texas, Virginia, Bangalore, many parts of India. So a big welcome to you all. And I'll share my screen. Come right up to the beginning and get us on full screen. So today, this evening, this morning in America, I always like to say good morning, America, and good evening, India. We're going to talk about ecosystemic coaching. How do we increase the contribution that coaches and coaching can make to the great challenges of our time? And one thing we know is that the challenges are getting bigger, not just year by year, but week by week. And that means that any profession is having to look constantly about how do they step up to making sure that what they're doing is future fit and is making the biggest contribution possible to the changes our world needs. And just recently, and I'll give you my LinkedIn link at the end, but I do regular blogs on LinkedIn, and the last one I wrote was on privilege and pride. And I started that particular blog by saying, when I was young, I thought that if I worked hard, was successful, I would attain privilege, and privilege would buy me freedom. And now, as I enter my 70s, I realize privilege does not buy you freedom. It buys you responsibility. The more privilege you have, the more responsibility you have. And once I realized that, I had to look at the extraordinary amount of privilege I had in my life. The privilege I have from my education, from where I live, the fact that I live in a place that is not suffering incredible fires or drought, the privilege I get from having a family, the privilege I get from the network of connections, the privilege I get from the different trainings and experiences I've had in my life. And each one of these buys me responsibility. And I think that all of us, if we're coaches, have an enormous privilege of having not just intellectual training, but emotional training and personal development, having an extraordinary community of people to work with. And we need to think, how do we utilize that privilege? What do we do? Do we just hold on to that privilege for ourselves, or do we reinvest it in the beneficial differences we can make in the world? So let me begin by welcoming you from whatever country. Perhaps I'll welcome you with some immortal lines from the great Sufi poet Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, who said, "Come, come, whomever you are, worshipper, lover, cynic or friend. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Even if you have failed and broken your vows 1,000 times, welcome, welcome, welcome once again." I love that. Even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times, even if you have failed and failed to step up to what you aspire to. And we all have been in sessions with coachees. And I have just come from a big change session with many senior leaders from a large global organization. And immediately I came off the phone, I thought, oh, that's what I should have said. And I had to leave early to join this talk. And every time that we need to have compassion for the people we work with and compassion for ourselves, and to realize that every failure is a learning opportunity, and every difficult client is a great teacher, because every difficult client takes us to our learning edge, where we meet them at their learning edge and there discover what the world of tomorrow needs from both of us. And if we can treat every difficult client, every difficult organization, and realize there's no such thing as toxic bosses, difficult employees, impossible customers. There are only modes of engagement we have not yet found. Then life is always teaching us and always taking us to the next level. So what are we going to look at in this talk? To consider how we might make the changes to increase the beneficial impact coaching and we as coaches can make, not only for our coachees, but for all their stakeholders, the systems they are part of, and the health and well-being of our one shared ecology. So we're going to start by looking at how coaching needs to be radically different in the next 40 years from the last 40 years, in order that it's really stepping up to using its privilege of position and networking and learning to make the real difference. We can understand the key elements first of systemic coaching that delivers value not just for the coachee, but for the wider systems, and then ecosystemic coaching. And I'll go into some real practical things about what we can each do to ensure that the wider ecology has a place in every coaching conversation. It has a seat in every meeting. That it is part and parcel of what we're all conscious of in every session. And we'll end by helping you think about, so how do you develop your own action plan from this? And what are the commitments just from this 90 minutes that are small commitments that will make a big difference to what you are doing to make a beneficial impact in the world? So some of you have done this with me before, but I always like to start by some sort of visualization that brings the wider world in. So I invite you to sit back in your chair, put your feet firmly on the ground, rest your arms, and then close your eyes. Whether you're listening this to a live or on recording. With your feet flat on the ground, your seat back in the chair, just feel the support from the chair, from your seat and from your spine, and feel the support from the earth beneath you. The earth that supports all that we do. Feel that energy coming up from the earth, deep in the earth, through the foundations of the building, through any floors beneath you, right up through your feet and through your legs, your groin, your belly, your heart, your throat, your face, your head. Take a deep in-breath through your nose, drawing the energy up, this freely available energy. It's available to us all the time. And tap into that and breathe it out with a big, deep in-breath. Draw the energy down from the skies above you, through the crown chakra of your head. And feel that vibration and energy within you. And then a deep out breath through your mouth, just to let go the air, to send it round the world. And then with a second in-breath, I'd like you to visualize the people that your work in your life serves. You might start with picturing your family, brothers, sisters, parents, children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, cousins. Then you might add to that collage your coachees, and then people your coachees serve, their teams, people they lead, the other parts of the organization, their colleagues, their customers, partners, suppliers. Then further out to the communities where those organizations operate. And most of us coach people from many parts of the world, so try and picture some of those different communities that your work ripples out in service of. The communities that provide the infrastructure and the roads and the energy and the employees' housing and places of recreation. And then further out to the ecology in which those communities are embedded, that freely provide our earth and our water and our food, our air, our warmth. And try and hold that collage of many levels of nested systems, the people who your work serves today. And then just imagine your coaches, individuals, teams, organizations of tomorrow. Our future generations and how our work serves them, not just the people of today. So now we are thinking future back and outside in, and I invite you to think of all those people in your collage, your montage of people your work serves, we're here with you today. What's the question that they would want you to be asking on their behalf? What is it they would want coaching and your coaching to step up to? What's their future need that's providing the learning edge for you and for our profession? And just see what comes. Your current or future coaches, your family, their teams, the organizations. And if you were to say to them, what is the more that is needed from me? What would be their response? And when you're ready, I invite you to take another just deep breath out. And come back and open your eyes. And I invite you to start putting into the chat box some of the questions that your stakeholders would like you to ask today, so that their voice is here besides your voice. And what is the more they would like you to step up to and the coaching profession to step up to? So do find the chat box. Do start to put some of those in as we go through this. And when we stop, we'll stop a couple of times for questions. I'll ask VG to read out some of the things that are coming in. But let's just look at some of the first questions that have come in, VG. Are there some things coming into the chat box now?
Yeah, there are. So Dharmesh says, bring more joy in this world.
Bring more joy. Lovely. What else? What are the stakeholders asking us to address?
In what way can you coaches improve the quality of my life? How have you
increased the quality of their life? Which then is, what is quality life we need to think about? What is well-being? What is being well?
Yeah.
Great.
Venita Josephs writes, how have you provided support to children during this time?
So how do we remember the children? The First Nations people in North America say that in the center of any leadership circle should be the children.
Yeah.
And actually, wouldn't it be marvelous if there was a spare chair in every boardroom in the world, which had the voice of the next generations, the voice of the children? Lovely. What else came in?
There's a lovely point about courage, Tracy, from Tracy. Courage is what is needed from me.
Courage. Courage to I wonder. Courage to do what?
Tracy, you might put that
we
up.
won't. You don't need to answer that now, but we will try and address before we finish today. What is the courage that's needed from us? Yeah.
And there are one or two more. Hope of a better
Yeah.
life for them and their stakeholders. And how do they attain their dreams and progress in these troubled times?
Right. So let me just reframe. Vijay, you know that I always reframe. That's part of the important skills of us as coaches.
Right.
We've got to be careful about how do they fulfill their dreams, because we can all have dreams, but we need to be able to fulfill the collective dream of the earth, not just the human dream, and not just the individual dream of what we each want, but what is needed. So one of the things I will explore in this talk is, and Vijay, you probably remember the moment on her training when I said, I'm not interested in what my clients want. And people were a little shocked. And I have said to many chief executives, I'm not interested in what you want from coaching. I'm only interested in what is needed. Right? I'm not interested in being on your agenda or my agenda. I'm interested in us being on life's agenda. So I think we have to ask not how do we fulfill individuals' dreams, but what is the anima mundi, the soul of the world, and what is the dream that's longing for?
Yeah.
That would be a very interesting thing for us to hold through this conversation today.
Sure. Keep that as the frame, right?
Yes. So what is the next one that came in?
Aladi says, what small steps can we take towards normalcy?
Towards normalcy.
Yeah.
Well, here again, you see, I will reframe, because we cannot go back to the normal of yesterday. If we treat everything as a teacher, then we have to say that COVID-19 has been a great teacher. But are we learning the lessons? COVID-19 isn't asking us, how do you treat me as a problem and get back to where you were? It's saying, how do you learn from COVID-19 the lessons? Because what we don't learn will come even stronger in the next global challenge. And I will try and address what are some of the important lessons of COVID-19.
Yeah.
And one of them, and I wrote a blog on this, what do we need to learn? It's still on my website and on LinkedIn. We are all in this together. One of the big lessons from the pandemic is your health is not your own. Your health, what you're doing to look after your health will affect the health of the people around you. You're responsible for their health, and they're responsible for your health. And what people are doing outside the world will affect your health. There's no part of this earth that is not affected by your health or affecting your health. So how do we really use that to shift our consciousness? It's not just our health, it's not our own. Yeah? And yet we're so used to locating health and well-being in individuals and trying to fix it there. We're not yet learning the lesson. Is there one more and then we'll move on?
Yeah, there's one more actually, which is a more specific stakeholder question from Beverly. How do I lead my teams through this time? Remote working, uncertainty, etc., while sustaining my own positivity, strength, and well-being?
Oh, well, that I will, because it's not coming up in the talk, I will address right now, because it's such, I've been working with many teams right from last December, when I was working with some people in China when pandemic first started. and helping a lot of teams around the world look at how do they operate through this period, and how do they go virtual, and how do they, and I have seen some teams really grow and become far more successful through the pandemic, right? Despite the fact they've been working virtually, they've become more focused, more purpose-driven, more bonded, and more effective as a team than they were prior to it, and others that have got worse. And part of that is, if we are a team leader, and I'm sure there's a few watching this, what we have to realize that the role of the team leader, I would put into 3 steps. It is our job to be looking at future back and outside in, not being sucked down to the operational detail of today. But there's a lovely little book called 3 Horizon Thinking. The leader has to be able to think in keeping the work of today going, innovating for tomorrow, and what's coming over the horizon. So the job of the leader is to frame the challenges. To say, look, team, these are some of the challenges, not just of today, but of the future that we need to step up to. But the next most important is to say, from the heart, and I need all of your help in working out how we're going to address these challenges. The biggest mistake I made for many years as a leader, and I see most leaders making, is we think that leaders have to come with solutions. The world is too complex. If you come with solutions, there are 2 dangers. One is you cannot see the whole system. The solutions have to be collectively and collaboratively generated. Your job is to frame the challenge, to ask for help with humility from your heart, and then orchestrate how people can help address those challenges. The second problem, if the solutions come from you, the team will not own them. There's a lovely phrase which goes, people do not resist change, they resist being changed. If people do not co-create the response, they will not own it, and they will not feel part of it. So I think that, in a nutshell, is a very important shift in how we think about leadership. And thank you, Fiji. That's been really helpful. And we'll come back to keep putting questions into the chat box as we go through, and we will stop. So for some of you who are with us in May, this is a little bit of a resume, but I'm going to set a whole new context for it. In May, I talked about all we've achieved in coaching in the 40 years that I've been involved. I think I looked up recently. My first coachee was 1978, when coaching, executive coaching, was just beginning. And we just achieved so much in those 40 years in taking leadership development out of the classroom, personalizing it, making it about current challenges, not just about historic case studies, by personalizing it and realizing that leadership is as much about EQ and about, as I talk about, WeQ, collaborative intelligence, as it is about IQ. And we made an enormous contribution to absolutely transforming management and leadership development. And we've taken coaching into organizations to develop internal coaching communities and managers as coaches. But a lot of what we've developed in the last 40 years is not going to address the issues of the next 40 years. A lot of what we were doing in those 40 years can now be done by the managers and leaders themselves. And internal, experienced, trained coaches and external coaches need to move on to where the new added value is. And that's what we're going to explore. And part of that is that, and there's a little video on our website with Giles Hutchins, who's written some very interesting books, and I talk about what is the many challenges our world is facing. And all of these, I would say, are much bigger than the current pandemic. And what's more, all 7 of these are interconnected. By far, probably the biggest is the climate emergency, because this will affect our economy and our personal health far more than coronavirus has to date, much, much more, and is already, through people suffering from air quality, people suffering from sea level rise, people suffering from pollution. It does, there's a lovely book by a Canadian writer called This Changes Everything. And that's one of the things that makes the climate emergency probably the most important, but it's interconnected and affected by all the others. Air, sea, and soil degradation. The loss of topsoil means that the food crisis in the world will get much bigger unless we address soil degradation. Air pollution. We have many cities around the world that are way beyond what the World Health Authority say is safe air for people to survive in, let alone other species. The loss of biodiversity. The fact that we have had the biggest extinction of other animals on this earth ever, and many of the others are now totally dependent upon what human beings do, means that we are depleting the variety in our ecosystems. And that is connected to the fact that we have monoculture that is burning down forests which are rich in biodiversity to replace them with great tracts of grazing land and beef pasture. And this notion of control. The fact that we believe, and you'll hear it in all the language around coronavirus, how do we control this very small living creature that's causing human beings to be ill? All our ways of response to challenge is to try and control more rather than learning the wisdom to work with the systems. Increasing mental distress. I discovered recently that for the first time in human history, more young men between 18 and 40 are dying from suicide than are dying from wars and murder and terrorism put together. We have growing eco-anxiety turning up in increased rates of depression. The number of people who are on antidepressants is becoming a bigger percentage of the population. And yet, we are richer and healthier physically than we've ever been in human history, as a globe, as a species. Human prejudice, and in that I mean all the issues of racial prejudice, gender prejudice, age prejudice, tribal prejudice, religious prejudice. There was a lovely moment at the first climate conference in 1992 in Rio, where they were trying to work out carbon reduction strategies to be shared around the world, when the poorest countries came to the first President Bush and said, it's unfair that we're being asked to reduce the carbon pollution at the same rate you are in the West and in America, because a lot of our pollution comes from the fact that we are doing the manufacturing of goods that are being consumed to support your way of life. Because a lot of our goods are made in China or in India or many parts of the world, Southeast Asia, Africa. When they said, so, you know, we shouldn't be expected to make the same
Peter, I'm not sure if it's me, but I'm not able to hear you.
It's not you. I can't hear him either.
Okay.
I thought the exact same thing. I thought my headphones were.
Would you just want to test your microphone, Peter?
Wonder what happened.
He's not on mute either.
Mm-mm. Peter, I think you can hear us. Do you want to, on the Zoom screen, do you want to check if maybe Zoom selected the change what it's using? It does that sometimes. Still can't hear you.
Let's see if that does it.
There we go. Yes, hello, hello, hello. We can hear you. Yes, Peter, can you hear us?
Yeah, that works, does it?
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
that's
it does.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. You can all hear my voice now.
Yes, we can.
So let me go back to sharing screen.
You're all good.
Right. Oh, here we go. So I was just talking about the poorer countries coming to President Bush and saying, look, a lot of our pollution is created from building the products to support your way of life. And President Bush's response was, the American way of life is not up for negotiation. And I think that just captures how widening inequality globally and within countries, which is greater inequality than we've ever had in human history, and human prejudice and non-understanding play into all of the other issues. And all of these are interdependent. So I'd like to say that one of the biggest challenges, whether we are coaches, consultants, educators, HR professionals, leaders, spiritual ministers or spiritual teachers, we are all part of one great work. And that is, how do we shift human consciousness so that it is fit to address the challenges that life is giving us? Because these issues cannot be solved one at a time or breaking them down into separate problems. And we need to look at how do we evolve human consciousness so that human beings can really collectively address these issues. And and that means that we will not be able to do it with linear, atomized problem-solving thinking, which was the traditional thinking that grew out of the Enlightenment, where you break a problem down to its separate parts, and you say, "Oh, Magda, you sort out the employees and be my HR director. Vijay, you be my sales director, and you deal with all the customers, and Ran, you go off and you manage all the investors." Because the real challenges don't lie in the parts any longer, they lie in the connections. And that means the first step we made was to systems thinking. But often when we move to systems thinking as coaches, we think all we have to do is to focus on asking our coachee about the system out there. Right? We start to change our focus from the individual to the team, or from the team to the function, or the function to the organization. But we are still looking at things within a boundary of a system, without realizing that we all exist within nested systemic levels. That it's never just an individual who comes into the coaching room, because they come in with the team dynamic within them, right? So they carry the team dynamic into the coaching room with them. They carry the organizational culture into the room with them. They carry their family history inside them. That all the systems that we are nested in, right up to the ecology, are nested within us. as we are nested in them. So systemic awareness is impossible to just do with your left hemisphere neocortex through analysis and understanding. It requires our right hemisphere thinking. It requires our liminal brain, our embodied knowing. What a lovely African writer I was reading recently, a feminist, an Afro-feminist, wrote about. It requires sensuous knowledge, embodied knowledge, so that we can tune into these many levels of nested system that are there at whatever level we are focusing on. And we can see the patterns that are playing out between the levels of system, not just within them. And then finally, how do we shift consciousness so that we can realize we cannot solve the ecological issues as a species? We have to learn with and work in partnership with the wider ecology in order to move forward, not try and control and manage it. And this is what I shared some of this in May about. We know that without a massive shift in what we're doing collectively on current pledges, which have not yet been enacted, we're going to achieve not the 1.5 degrees centigrade rise in temperature that people said we ought to try and achieve, but 2.5 to 2.8. If we go on what the countries of the world are doing currently, we're going to be up to 3 degrees centigrade rise. And if we don't start to act more profoundly, we could end up hitting 4 degrees. It's worthwhile finding out what the global consequences of 4 degrees are. We are talking about, at that level, ecological collapse, not just polluted cities and sea level rises. And interestingly, if you go back to back when they did the first limits to growth in the late 1970s and early 1980s, they did some whole world modeling, which they did some major computer work, and they looked at all the interactions and they predicted what some of the consequences were. And actually their model, and they've just done some updating of it, was very accurate in predicting some of the things we are now experiencing. And some of you know that we're having the second, and I know Coach Aria are involved in supporting this, that on the 1st of October, the second global coaching, what I call webathon, which is a 24-hour conversation going right around the world. For coaches to join wherever you are in the world. You can join for 1 hour or 2 hours at any time of the day. It would go from midnight GMT to midnight GMT. So it will start in New Zealand, being hosted in New Zealand, and then Australia, then Southeast Asia and China, and then it goes to India, and then it goes to the Middle East, then Europe, and then it ends up in Hawaii 24 hours later. I love this quote: "We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who could do something about it." Because I think that puts it very harshly. And we have to have the courage to have that degree of just naming the truth in all the work we do. And so why is this issue more than others? So when I first was talking about bringing attention to the ecology into coaching, I had many people say to me, but it's not our job to bring our values and our beliefs into the coaching room. We should be bringing the ecology in. And I said, but wait a moment, the ecology is already in every coaching room. And I rather provocatively said, are you telling me that your clients don't eat, they don't breathe? Because if they do, they sit on furniture. The ecology is in every room we occupy. It's just that often we're not attending to it. We're not noticing it. We are turning a willful blind eye to it. And as we say here, increasingly, we are having clients and coachees who are concerned about what their companies are doing, who are concerned about the journey to work. I was coaching people who live in Beijing and who have to travel an hour and a half through really polluted atmosphere, who were so pleased when lockdown happened that they didn't have to make these journeys every day through high pollution. And actually their health got better, and so did the air. So one of the things we often do in our workshops is we get people to think future back. What is it if your grandchildren or your sisters or your brother's grandchildren or 2 generations from now said to you, what were you coaches and supervisors and leaders doing in your greatly privileged world? And I have to say, I have probably lived in the most privileged generation that's ever lived. So I really feel that privilege. What privilege in terms of health, in terms of travel, in terms of access, in terms of global networking, in terms of the World Wide Web. What were you doing leaving us a legacy of a world of greater demand, growing expectations and diminishing resources, alongside a threatened planet, the possible extinction of the human as well as thousands of other species? What's got me so passionate and still working is I have 5 grandchildren between 5 and 12. And if I live long enough for them to grow up and become leaders, and they look me in the eye and say, what were you doing in helping us develop the capacity to address the problems that your generation is leaving us? I would like to be able to look those children from all around the world in the eye and say, this is what I did. I didn't just help chief executives and senior leaders and managers become more efficient and create more product and make more profit. I really made a difference to individuals, organizations, and communities, and all their stakeholders and the environment by helping people shift human consciousness to be able to address what the world has needed. So how do we evolve to become future fit? So I'll just say a few of these and then we'll start for some questions. A lot of this is in my book. We did a coach training in systemic coaching through Coach Aria, and we will be doing another one through Coach Aria. And this was all based on how do we deliver value, not just personal development to the individual coachee, but how do we coach with the coachee to provide benefit for all people their work and life serves. I'm going to just briefly talk about 6. We've talked about seeing everything as interdependent and connected already. We're going to talk about working in partnership rather than as a customer supplier. How do we listen systemically? How do we bring the stakeholders' voice into the room? How do we have those wider global issues part of what we're doing locally? So step 1 is, how do we realize that coaching is not done by the coach? Which may sound a radical thing to say for all of you who are living as a coach. But I think we have to move out of the whole notion of the coach does the coaching and the coachee receives it, to know the coaching is not even done by the coachee or even by the coach and the coachee together. The coaching is done by the coach and coachee working shoulder to shoulder in partnership, facing the agenda of challenges that life is constantly presenting. So when I say I'm not interested in what clients want, I'm interested in what's required. I'm interested in focusing on not my agenda or the coachees, but on life's agenda. Yeah. So we'll talk about how do we do that in a minute. So I used to ask these kind of limiting questions. You know, what do you want from coaching? What are your goals? What do you want to talk about today? And at the end, I would end up by saying, what's been helpful and what could be more helpful next time? And I thought I was asking for feedback as a coach by asking that last question. VG will remember when I said this on the training, I said, you know, after many years, I realized I wasn't asking for feedback. I was asking for reassurance, because that's what my coaches gave me. Oh yes, no, this has been very helpful. I'm sure, you know, it'd be, you know, more of the same. So I wasn't asking for feedback, but what else was I doing? Was I was stepping arrogantly into the belief that I'd done the coaching. Not the two of us, and not life. It's life that does the coaching. We're there like a midwife to help life do what is natural and what is needed. So that takes us out of customer and supplier. It takes us into partnership. But how do we do that? So there are some videos of me on the WBEX site doing live demonstrations of this way of working, which you can tap into. But now, if it was a first session, I always start by, first of all, wanting to make heart-to-heart connection. Tell me about you. Tell me about what you care about. Tell me what you're passionate about in life. What really matters to you? Having made that heart connection, I want to go into a collaborative inquiry, inquiry, as the Americans say, to discover together what's the work we need to do. What's the work that life is requiring us to do together? So that's where I'll ask them, you know, like I did you, who does your work in life serve? Who are your important stakeholders? Then we would bring them into the room. This is why I think we must always have more than 2 chairs in our coaching room. There's several behind me, so that we've got space for to bring different voices in, invite the coachee to go and sit in the shoes of their team, the shoes of their customers, the shoes of the investors, the shoes of the other teams they work with, the shoes of the community, the shoes of the ecology. And from there, talk about what's the work that particular part of their ecosystem needs this coach and this coachee to work on together. Because our job is, we were often taught in coaching that the coachee, you know, they have the solutions. And after 40 years, I have to say that's not my experience. The best coaching work happens when they don't have the answer. I don't have the answer. But together we have walked to the learning edge, where we both recognize that neither of us has the answer, but life is demanding we find one. And it's there that the creativity happens. It's there that together in partnership, both with our unknowing, discover together with the help of grace, some new thinking, some new response between us and within us. And at the end now, I always say, not, you know, what's been helpful, what could be more helpful. I said, if those stakeholders we've been exploring were in the room, let's just think, what would they have valued about the work you and I have done together? What would they have, and what would their challenge be to us? What would they be encouraging us to do more? A bit like the questions we ask at the beginning of this workshop today. So that we're constantly going to the next learning edge, taken there by our stakeholders and by life. And there we're standing where neither of us has the answer, but knowing together we have to have the generative dialogue that provides the space for grace for the answer to arrive. Thirdly, we have to listen systemically. That means we have to not just listen to the coachee and their problems and their situation. We have to not just listen with our ears, but listen with our whole body. We have to very quickly, with empathy and compassion, get what it feels like to be in their shoes. We have to listen not just to them, but what's happening in the dynamic of their relationships. We have to be able to listen through the coachee to the world beyond, their world beyond them. And that means we have to listen with wide-angled empathy and wide-angled compassion. The difficulty about all our trainings is we often learn, and I've trained as a coach, I've trained as a consultant, a counselor, and a psychotherapist. And in all those trainings, I learned so much about how to deepen my empathy with the person sitting opposite me. What I discovered over the years, that meant that I got so empathic with the individual in the room with me that I started to hear their story as reality. I started to experience the world through their eyes. I started to believe that they were the victim, the organization was the persecutor, this toxic boss they worked for. And that meant that I started to play out the drama triangle. My coachee victim, the organization persecutor, me rescuer. And that way I was colluding with a stuck systemic dynamic, not helping it. So I have to be able to have empathy for everyone in their story, not just the person in the room. And that takes a lifetime of practice and discipline to master, way beyond what we got taught in our coach training. So I have to listen through the coachee with compassion and empathy for everybody in the field, and to hear what the field needs, not what the boss needs or the individual needs, but what's needed. And I have to listen to things not as problems to be solved, but lessons that life is generously offering. And VG knows well, and I think Magda does, that one of my favorite quotes comes from the spiritual teacher Ram Dass, American spiritual teacher who studied for many, many years with many great Indian teachers. And when I learned from him, he said, it's amazing how many of us sign up at the school of life, but then we spend our lives complaining about the curriculum, rather than realizing that life is generously offering us the next challenge. So every difficult client is our next teacher. Every difficult organizational culture is our next teacher. And every pandemic and world crisis is our teacher. And if we can hold that, then we don't get overwhelmed. We get excited about the next challenge. So we need to listen through the individual to all the levels that arrive inside the individual and through the individual. And we need to find techniques, and we talk a lot about these in the book I did with Eve Turner, about how do we bring those stakeholders in. I've talked about using empty chairs, how I use those in team meetings and in boardrooms, where we have chairs for future generations, for the ecology, for the investors, the employees, the customers. We get members of the board to go and sit in them and speak from that perspective. We need to learn to never locate the problem or the challenge in an individual, but always in a relationship or a connection. Never relate it in the system or the board, but always. So I often, I don't know if you remember this bit, VG, that there's a lovely moment in your training where people said, but the people I coach, they don't have the influence or the power. They can't make those changes. And I said, when people say to me, whatever level they are in the organization, we can't do that in our organization, I just use a one-word intervention. When they say we can't do that in an organization, I say yet, which takes it from powerlessness to actually there's a challenge there's a mode of engagement we haven't yet found together. There's nothing we cannot influence. And the other big thing that we use a lot is fast forward rehearsals. I often say the road to hell is paved with good intentions, aha moments, and action plans. It's important we do not end with just people going away with a cerebral action plan. It's our job to take it from, this is where we get insight, but change is always embodied. So in every coaching session I do, I always move when they say, oh, right, yes, now I'll think about that. And I think I need to have a good new conversation with my boss. I'll say, Let's do that conversation right now. Don't tell me about what you're going to do, show me. Imagine your boss is sitting right next to me here. Show me how you're going to walk into the room. Show me how you're going to start that conversation. Because now I'm helping them move from good intention here to embodied change. And then we might rehearse it several times until they found their way of saying that in a way that will make a difference. So let's hear some of the questions before I then go on about what we can do, particularly about the ecological. VG, what questions are coming in?
I don't know. I'm sensing, Peter, everyone's just taking in so much of all what you've said, because I remember, some of this you shared. I think it moves you to a highly reflective space. I did see one or two comments about Sir Ken Robinson. There was one bit of feedback from Dharmesh, who says that, in the context of your example, he's mentioned about how, emissions and global warming has really been slowed down by the virus. But no specific questions at this stage. So you
yes,
might.
you see, the danger, of course, is that coronavirus has done what we need to do in coaching, which is to call a pause in the kind of travelator we can get caught on, or business as usual. We can all just get caught in this eternal travelator or escalator. And in a pause, one can get a new perspective. Or, so we know that, for the first time with lockdown in Delhi, you could see the Himalayas. We know that the air was cleaner in Beijing than it's been for decades. We know that fish return to the canals in Venice. The danger is, of course, that there's a great now pressure on governments to rush back to restoke the economy. And all those benefits could disappear very, very quickly if we don't start to say, not how do we return to the old normal, but what's the new normal, not that just the economy needs, not just the human beings needs, but the world needs. Yeah?
Yeah.
And many governments at the moment are struggling to meet the needs of sustaining the economy and the needs to manage people's safety and health from the pandemic, and manage people's mental health if they're locked down too long. And so, how do we support people in holding these things all in connection systemically? I think is part of the great work that coaching is called to do.
Yeah. There's another question, Peter, from Ravi. And he's requesting you to elaborate a little bit about what you just said. There is nothing that you cannot influence.
Yeah. So many teams would say to me when I was coaching executive teams, we've got to be clear about what we can control and what we can't control. And I used to kind of work with that for many years. And as I've got older and I've kind of studied more of the neuropsychology and I've done more spiritual training, actually I've got to realize there's nothing in our lives we can control, right? 99% of what's happening in our own bodies we're totally unaware of, and it happens by itself. So even ourselves we cannot control. We are a living system that is outside of the consciousness of our neocortex. A lot of the research is showing us this now. But I say we can't control anything, but we're responsible for everything. Because we're all in this together. Whatever I do will affect everything in the earth. Whatever I do will have ripple effects that will go everywhere. So if we can really embrace the fact that we control nothing but are responsible for everything, I think a much more practical thing to ask is, what is it we can change by ourselves, which is relatively little, what can we change with others, and who do we need to have around the table to change it? Which is the second bucket, if you like. And the third is, what can we influence others to change? And I would suggest to you that everything is in one of those three. Yeah? I don't know if BG, you can think of anything that isn't in either something I can change by myself, I can change by others if I get the right people working with me, or I can influence others to change.
Okay.
My challenge would be to the people on the call is, if you think there's something that can't be addressed in one of those three buckets, put it in the chat box, and we'll explore it.
Yeah. So there's another question. Would you have time to take that now, Peter?
Yes, because I think I also going to need to put the light on because it's getting dark and I realized my light isn't plugged in.
Yeah, I saw that too. Your background suddenly had become a little dark.
So let me just plug this in while you're giving me that question.
Okay, so can I just read out the question?
Yes, do.
Okay, so this is from Vinitha. What are the effective ways of nudging your coachee to think about ecology as a part of the whole system? If someone has really in line of this thinking, like humans and plants exchange energies and necessarily coexist.
Right. So I think that's a lovely segue to where we're going next. Because I'm going to talk about the very simple things we can do that isn't bringing our agenda into the room, but is awakening our consciousness, our coachee's consciousness to the ecology that we are part of and is part of us. Yeah. So let me just go into that and then come back to see if I've answered the question, BG. So some of you know that I've been active in this area for some time and supported the people who've started the Climate Coaching Alliance. And they've adopted this model from me. It's on the website, climatecoachingalliance.org, where we talk about the first thing we need to do is our own work. To be able to attend to the ecology that's in every coaching conversation, every coaching room, we have to go through our own educational process. And hopefully very soon we will be much more focused on in every primary coach training. First of all, we have to start in the light green there with being eco-curious. Actually, the first thing is to be interested in what is happening in that wider world, not just the world in our four walls or locally. To go out and become eco-informed. To become eco-aware is to actually notice how is it impacting on me, inside me? What's the inner work of change I have to do in order to be able to address it externally? Then what are the skills I need to appropriately address it and attend to it in the coaching room? And then how do I address it beyond the coaching room? How can I play a bigger role? And I'll address all of these kind of very briefly. But we'll let you have the slides. That tells you the 5 stages. And I think this is, if you like, the inner curriculum we've all got to do. And it's not a linear curriculum. You know, I'm constantly having to go around these 5 stages myself. Keep up my eco-curiosity, find out more, look at how it's changing constantly, look at the science, do my own emotional work, learn new skills, go out and find the coaches who are doing the really innovative work in this area, and look at how I can adapt those and use them in my own coaching work. But then also, and I'll talk about this, how can I take responsibility, not just for what I do in the coaching room, but, and I'll share this a little bit later on, but I did a whole developing of my own business, a sustainability policy, and started to realize that I have to take responsibility for what the people who are managing my pension scheme are doing. I have to make choices about where I'll run trainings and what's the what's the sustainability policy of the training center. I'll only speak at conferences that are actually doing something now, if I'm having to travel to it, to actually reduce the carbon imprint of that conference, and making sure we're aware of the ecological cost of the conference. So I now will have a conversation with any training center I use about what they're doing in their food policy, their energy policy, before I agree to run the training course with them. And so how do we take responsibility for our whole value chain, not just for the narrow bit we're focusing on? So let's look at some things we can do actually in the coaching room. So I talked about how I now start every new relationship with, and I have one tomorrow. I'm starting with a senior executive in one of the world's biggest media companies. Who does your work serve? Well, he'll probably tell me about his role, and he'll tell me about his colleagues and about the people who report to him. But who does your organization serve? What added value do they bring to the world? And what is it you can be doing, and we can be doing the coaching, to increase the beneficial value you bring to the organization, which brings the beneficial value, increases the beneficial value your organization gives to the world. And then, I'll bring that out to and how is that going to benefit not just the people who tune into your programs today, but the future generations, both in your organization and your customers' future generations. So what we're doing is we are focusing on not what the client wants, but we're moving to purpose in the very first conversation. And within that, I will probably ask, what is your organization doing to make the ecology something that will survive greater well-being over the next century? And I'll pose that as a question, because I find if I don't ask that question in the first meeting, it becomes harder to raise that question later. So I'm not bringing an agenda around it. I'm just, if you like, calling our attention to that as a stakeholder of every one of us, and is a major contributor to every organization. So we ignore it at our peril. So I make sure that the ecology has its stakeholder seat in the room. And then a very other simple thing, even if I'm working, I coached in Canary Wharf in London, and top of skyscrapers as I have in New York. And it's always very interesting going up the lift with coachees up 40 floors, and just catching up with them in the lift, if it's just the two of you. But then when I go into the room on the 40th floor, I will always walk with them to the window. I'll say, let's just pause before we start. What do you notice outside the window? That very act, and we'll just stand there and breathe together and just notice that means that we are welcoming the wider world symbolically into our coaching room, rather than narrowing our perspective. And then what else do we bring into the room? Magda and Vijay commented about the flowers I have today, and they know that I made a commitment at the beginning of coronavirus that as I first did so much on Zoom in January, that I would have fresh flowers behind me on every Zoom call I did. And it's amazing how many people notice that when I'm working with them. I don't comment on it, but they do. And it's just that small ways of attending to and bringing in the system in very subtle ways. I also was doing some teaching on video last week, and in the whole session I was holding a marvelous piece that sits in my hand of brain coral. And I quoted as I was holding it 4 lovely lines from William Blake, which I think are relevant to every coaching session. To see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower to hold eternity, so to hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in 1 hour. Do look up those lines. They're such beautiful lines from Blake. And it's that we're having to do in the coaching room. We're having to see in the grain of sand how the bigger issues are holographically in that small problem. We're having to open up the beauty into the coaching room. We're having to see the whole world situation through the lens of the particular in each coaching session. And I'll go to number 7. I was supervising a very experienced coach who works a lot in the media. And she said, look, when lockdown happened, my poor coachees who are senior executives in press and media and advertising, that they're working more hours than ever because they're having to work from home, they're having to manage Zoom meetings all day, they're having to manage their team through all this change. They've got children at home who are having to be home educated, and they're just pressure. And I have my eldest son who's 42 also works in the media and has a wife with a very, very full-time job and 3 children. So I knew about this from my own family. And so she said, they've asked me, could they have more frequent coaching sessions, but make them only half an hour? She said, and then they said to me, could we do it where we're both walking? Because I don't have a chance to get enough steps in a day. So could we do our coaching walking along with both of us on mobile phones with earpieces? So she did that. And she said, but what happens is that they're starting to walk faster and faster and faster, get out of breath, and the whole session feels a rush and pressure. What can we do about it? And we explored that for a while. And what we came to, which we then put into practice, was that halfway through every coaching session, when they were walking and getting faster and faster, she would just say, pause. Wherever you are, and I'll pause too. Let's just both pause at this moment. And we can do this right now on this call. Wherever you are, whatever time of the day, I ask you to pause. Just look out of your window. Just look around your room. If you have no windows, just imagine the world beyond you and ask yourself, where is beauty calling to you or speaking to you right now in the world around you? What is that wider world offering you that before the pause you hadn't noticed? So I just invite you just to do that for yourself right now. And that piece of beauty out of my window where I have the evening mist settling over the hills, I have a kind of light flashing on the horizon, to ask the question, what is the gift that that wider world is giving to me in our conversation right now? There was a lovely moment. I was working with somebody exploring, who was in America, and they were exploring a team they were working with. And we were doing this over Zoom in a group setting. And they were doing a constellation of this team. So I had them move around their kitchen diner, stepping into the role of different team members, stepping into the boss of the team and the boss's boss. And they went over to be one of the major stakeholders, and they suddenly, with shock, startled. I said, what is it? They said, I've looked out my window and there is a deer in my garden, a young deer, and it's licking its neck. And it was interesting that this person earlier on was doing this while he was talking about the pressure of the team. And he was both comforting himself and enacting unconsciously all this pressure on his neck, right? And the deer was licking his neck. It was just one of those lovely moments. So I said, become the deer. And as the deer, speak back to David and tell David, what would you be saying to him about what he needs to do differently with this team? And suddenly, an enormous new awareness emerged. There are gifts and resources out there in the world, if we can tap into them, that are so rich, but often we do not pause and open up enough to tap into them. There's a lovely, lovely quote, which I adapted from Michael Kavanagh, who's one of the great coach teachers in Sydney, Australia, who said resilience, and you could also say well-being, you could equally well say this, is the ability to tap into unrecognized resources, previously unrecognized resources, either in the world out there or within you. So that pause, that bringing in the objects, but we can also do it by walking, by coaching out of doors when we're not in lockdown, where we can walk side by side, because this is how we work in partnership. And I have people come here to where I live because I have a large, sort of small farm, but large garden, 37 acres. And we've got a whole woodland, we've got orchards, we've got fields with animals. And we practice how to walk alongside the coachee. We do coaching in pairs. And we invite ways of discovering how you can use what you're walking through to help you do the coaching. How we can help shift our focus from what's right in front of our feet to the path that's opening up, to the horizon and back again. How can we learn to work in different horizons? How do we use what surprisingly turns up on the walk as part of life, not just presenting challenges to us, but presenting resources to us to face those challenges? So we're using the trees, we're using what's around to actually be doing the coaching as much as we are. So the ecology is not just a problem on the agenda, it's doing the coaching as well as being part of what we're focusing on. Animals, other living beings, there are people who've done a lot of work, more than I have, coaching with horses or working with woodland deep immersion experiences. And this is where I think we have to realize human beings cannot solve the ecological crisis. We can only do it if we get back into partnership. And that can start with us as coaches. How are we partnering with the ecology to do the coaching? So let me just pause there to see if there are any questions before I then finally invite you to create your impact plan. Oh no, I'll do one thing before that, Vici. That last stage about being eco-active, I said I'd come back to. I would invite you to think about what you can do, not just to change your coaching, but to influence your colleagues. What you can do to influence the coach training so that we are not training tomorrow's coaches to do what we did, but to do what's needed for the future coachees in the future world. How do we transform coach training? How do we get onto our professional bodies and influence what they're doing to change the competencies and capacities, whether they're a member of ICF or APAC or EMCC? And one of the, Climate Coaching Alliance only started last November formally. By March, it had done May, it done an amazing achievement. It got the 5 leading coaching, mentoring and supervision professional bodies. Since then, several others have joined as well. For the first time ever, to sign a joint statement declaring climate emergency and to issue it with the same words at the same time. That's unprecedented. So what are you doing to change your local coach community, your alumni body, your professional association? What are you doing to take responsibility for your pension, your places where you run your training, the places where you deliver your coaching? You have so much more influence than you realize. So I told all the people managing my pensions that unless they could show me that that all my pensions were disinvested from oil and gas supplies, and I gave them another list, that I would stop using them altogether. Yeah, and if you go onto my website, you can read my sustainability policy if that's to help you create yours. But again, just by putting up your sustainability policy, your coachees will start to notice that, and they'll start asking you about it. It's another way of influencing. Yeah. So those are just some of the things you can start thinking about what you can do beyond what you're doing in the coaching room, but what you could be doing. And I'm sure there are many more that you can think of besides the ones that have been important for me. So what I'm going to be asking you to do in a moment while we address your questions is I'm going to ask each of you to get a pad and paper to start to write down how I would develop myself to think, coach, and be more systemic is. Complete that sentence. That's that whole inner journey, ecosystemic cycle. And then to bring it down to the very, very specific and immediate. My next steps are, what are your 3 next steps? And then from 3 to get down to what is one thing you are going to commit to doing, that one small thing that will mean that at least 100 of those stakeholders you envisioned at the beginning will benefit from you having the privilege of being at this talk. So this talk benefits thousands, not just 100. What is your commitment that will ripple out and benefit at least 100 of your stakeholders? And I'm going to ask you, because we can't hear from you all now, to actually make that final commitment within the next 24 hours to make it standing up to a member of your family, a friend, or a colleague. Because from all my research, I know that if you make a commitment standing up, eyeball to eyeball, to a person you care about, the chances of you doing it are magnified many times. If you just write it down, it will become another good intention which paves the road to hell. So please start thinking about those. And while we're doing it, BG, you could start telling me some of the questions that are coming in while we let people complete those sentences.
There's one question again from Vinitha. You know, she's mentioned coaching also starts at home with your young ones, especially children.
How lovely. And of course, our children and our grandchildren are often some of our best coaches. I have one of my great joys at the moment is one of my grandchildren who lives quite close comes on Saturday mornings and helps me in the garden. And it's just noticing how she is coaching me as much as I am coaching her. We are coaching each other across the generations. I love that though. Yeah, how do we start? How do we ask our children not wait till they're 35 for them to look us in the eye and say that this is what we need you to do for our generation. But you know, how am I asking my 12-year-old granddaughter, my 11-year-old grandson, you know, what is it you need our generations to do for you to step into this very complex world?
Yeah, right.
Fantastic.
So
and what a great teacher, what a great teacher Greta Thunberg is at 15. Not only about ecology, but about how, you know, she became a worldwide influencer, not by trying to set up a large organization, but just deciding what was right for her to do. All she did is went and sat alone on Fridays outside of school, outside the government building. And if you make your stand, right, true to your heart, the world comes to you. And she's got more millions of followers than any of us could dream of. Sorry, BJ.
Yeah, I think that's really the kind of questions coming in. Probably also, I think we are over our time, I suppose. So if there are any more questions, please put it down, or we can even take it subsequently. But you can put in your questions into the chat box right away. We do have some, a little bit, maybe a few minutes more.
Well, also I would ask you, please would you put your one commitment into the chat box? Because it'd be really good, because we can also learn from each other by hearing some of those, and if necessary, even opening some people's mics. But please, can I invite each of you, what's the one thing that you think you could do that will have the biggest ripple effect from today's talk that will bring benefits to the next generations and 100 of your stakeholders? And perhaps, BJ, as they come in, you could read some of them out, and that will encourage others.
Yes, I will do that, Peter. I mean, there's one already. Dharmesh's is, okay, that's, okay, not so much a commitment, I think, but it's more, a feedback. Humble with Peter's greatness and broad thinking, and commitment to change the planet for the future generations. Thank you, Dharmesh. It would be lovely to, if you'd like to share your commitment as well.
Yeah, because it's not me that's going to change the planet. It's all of us. My job is to encourage each of you to magnify what you're all doing. Some of you already, but some of you know how you can widen that beyond what you're currently doing. But what's the one simple step that you could actually commit to that will have the biggest ripple effect?
So there's this one from Gail. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. To bring more systemic ecology into the room. And Magda says, I will use the platform that we have at Kocharya to communicate and motivate. More power to you, Magda. Vinita's is weave in conversation of ecology in at least one conversation every day. Beautiful.
That's great. I love that specificness.
Yeah.
Because that's something we know we're doing or not doing. At the end of each day, to look back, which conversation time, and if I fail one day, to then ask the question, where could I have done that? Let's have some fast failures. Lovely.
And I think no commitment is too small, right? I mean, any action, however little or big, is a commitment.
Every small step counts.
And there's lots more commitments coming in. I'm just losing track of that. But yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to see.
Again, there's a discussion group that we have on LinkedIn. What I'll do after this session is I will start a topic around this, and it would be great if all of you could put your commitments there, because then they're also public. So,
Right.
they might have a stronger effect. And
so
Peter, I just want to add something else to the commitment that I put in there. You said specific. I'm like, no, that wasn't specific enough. I think what comes up a lot for me in the kinds of conversations I have with women, especially, is imposter syndrome. It comes up all the time. And for me as well, it came up just when you asked that action, what can we do specifically? And my head started going, okay, well, I could do this with this person or for this person. And I started thinking about how others can make an impact. I kind of forgot that, you know what, like I myself can do things too. I don't need to have a webinar where, Peter Hawkins, who everybody loves, is invited. I can just talk about this stuff. And you know what, if someone doesn't like it, I don't care. But we need to start realizing that we all can make that imposter syndrome needs to go away. Like I need to, anyway.
Yeah, we can make small steps that have big ripples. And That's why I think this thing about there is nothing we cannot influence. Yeah, because if we ask, well, who am I? If Greta Thunberg said, well, you know, I'm only 14 and I'm only a schoolgirl, and perhaps I have to wait till I've done my finished school, finished university, done my doctorate before I have a right to speak. Look at what she would have deprived the world of. We can all have a big ripple if we start where we are and realize all the things we are connected with. What a privilege that is. I want to say thank you to the people who have come, but a bigger thank you for the difference that you will be making to the world. And as I always say, just remember while you're doing that, that not just my grandchildren, but all of the world's grandchildren are relying on us, as well as all of the more than human world. It's desperate for human beings to wake up, desperate for human beings to shift their consciousness and to get back into partnership. So thank you for the difference you're making. Thank you for the journey you're going on. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Peter. The beautiful comments and sharing coming into the chat box is, you know, just a reflection of the last 90 minutes you've spent with us. Not just inspiring, but you know, it's infectious, Peter, when we hear you say all this. And yeah, it's been wonderful, Peter. It's always a privilege to be in your space and to listen to not just what you share, but you also so wonderfully embody.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Peter.
You mentioned it earlier, I'm giving a very different talk on October the 3rd. So do let people know about it through ICF Italia. Yeah. Which is going to be on the place of beauty in coaching. So if you are really interested in how you can not only see beauty in the midst of the difficulties, but do the beautiful and be the beautiful in coaching, do join me again to explore beauty in coaching on October the 3rd. It's on my website, and perhaps you can put it on yours as well, Magda.
Yeah, I will add it onto our LinkedIn page as well, so everyone can get notified.
So there will be a lot of poetry, and there'll be a lot of very practical things about how we let more beauty. We all need it. We all need it to help us meet these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, friend. Thank you so much, Peter. I can't wait to see your next session. As usual, you're always an inspiration. Thank you to everyone who has attended live, and to all of you who are watching this now, the recording. We'll also make it into a podcast, but I'm thinking that's not going to work too well because the slides were so great. So most likely you're seeing this on YouTube. But anyway, thank you so much for attending Awake, Aware, Arise. We are here tomorrow again with 3 sessions. So I hope that you can join us. And Peter, see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, and namaste.
Namaste.